careful, Chief. That elite was an ultra.
To this point, I've given a little glimpse of the ideas in my head, an attempt to awaken you to a sense of your awful situation. And this episode, I want to talk about some specifics, some specific actions that we can take to actually make things better. And this is not glow posting, okay? Do not put your name down on a list. Do not do anything illegal ever, okay? Just don't. It's a bad idea. Once you get caught in the legal system, it's like being stuck in a washing machine that slowly beats you to death. So do not do that. But this is our religion. You know, when we talk about political movements, there's a lot of federal activity going on there. But with this is our religion. Anyway, we'll get to it, but there's a lot that we can do that is mostly harmless, but will have huge effect. So let me explain. And the point of this is that we simply need to identify a goal and work to that goal with one mind, one purpose, an eye single to that purpose. We see the story of the Nephites and how they were manipulated, and we cannot be manipulated by them. The Nephites were probably constantly told that the greatest threat to the reign of the judges was those Lamanites with their dirt floors, that are out a million miles away, and we need to send soldiers over there to drop bombs on these people with dirt floors. Otherwise, they're going to blow up our whole country and take away our freedom. They did not do that. They simply had border security. That's all they needed to do. The Nephites understood it. The real problems came from within. It was the Zoramites, the Kingmen, the Amlicites, Gadianton robbers. That's where the real problems were. The Lamanites were not that hard to deal with, provided they had decent border security and not an insurrection of Kingmen holding their government/church leaders hostage. Because remember, the government in the Book of Mormon and the church have significant overlap. We read the story of, I believe it's Laconius, but the Nephite leader who defeated the Gadianton robbers. And how did he do it? Did he tell them, we just need to be individuals? No, he said, gather it up. We should gather up everything in one safe place. We should focus all of our efforts into one thing, and that is to prevent the Gadianton robbers' ability to loot, ability to steal, and they are not farmers, so they will get hungry. It was kind of like a reverse siege, We also read about the people of Ammon, the anti-Nephi Lehis, and through nonviolent resistance, they were able to defeat their enemies. So these are all great stories. And the most important one is Moroni with the title of liberty, because when there was an internal threat under his watch, did he take his army and his swords? No. He took a message. He took the title of liberty, and he marched. He marched for home, and he waved that banner, and many came to his call, and he was able to effectively regain control of the government. Now, initially, he suspected that the chief judge was a traitor, but as things unraveled, it became clear that the chief judge was not a traitor, but he was surrounded by traitors and had no one to help him. And so with this message, Moroni was able to rally the people and secure the voice of the people to reestablish order. And we are told, if we were all like Moroni, that the very gates of hell would be shut. That is a very big promise in the Book of Mormon. So there's a very interesting book called, it's more of a pamphlet really, an essay, and it's by a guy named Vaclav Havel. It's Eastern European, so if you know how to pronounce Czech, which I don't think anyone does, maybe not even the Czechs, then let me know. But a bunch of consonants, that's his name. So in this essay, it is remarkable because he was a person who lived through communism in what's now known as the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And this is like vanilla communism, like the one you think of when you think of communism. And we know that communism, it's one of the great heads of the great and abominable church of the devil. So in this book, The Power of the Powerless, he talks about how the powerless citizens of the Czech Republic, what they can do to pull at the threads of these huge, complex, totalitarian governments and how they can non-violently destroy them. And it's like, I know it's just a political thing, a political essay, but it is extremely spiritual. So he tells a story about a greengrocer. It's kind of this allegory. But the greengrocer, he lives in a town or a city or whatever, where there's a lot of shop owners, there's a lot of shopkeepers, and it is required that all of the shop owners put a sign in their window, and the sign says, "Workers of the world, unite." Now that's a nice message. We should unite. And the shopkeeper can lie to himself and say, why do I care about workers of the world uniting? That's a good thing. He can tell himself all he wants, that's why he's doing it. But that's not why he's doing it. The reason he's doing it is because he is powerless, and he is being made to, and because he has to. And so what the sign really says is, I am putting this sign up because if I don't, I will get in trouble, and I am afraid to do otherwise because I am afraid of being punished. And if that's what the sign actually said, the shopkeeper, this greengrocer, he probably wouldn't want to put it up. He might resist it. But because it's a lie, a big lie, he's able to psyop himself. He's able to convince himself to believe this big lie because the lie is so big that it's a little hard to see around the corners. But anyway, this guy, Havel or whatever his name is, he says, I'm actually going to read it because it's so powerful. Before I read it, so he talks about how a smaller dictatorship actually has less weaknesses than one of these giant, postmodern, post-totalitarian dictatorships because it is important that they control what you think. In a democracy, it is important to control what the people think because that is power, because the people's thoughts is what drives elections, which is what drives power. Whereas in a smaller dictatorship, you can just, the king says this, and he has guys with sticks, so gotta do what the king says. He goes on talking about the greengrocer, and then he finally gets to this part, which you should read it. It's really, really interesting. It's very, it hits right at home. Let us now imagine that one day something in our greengrocer snaps, and he stops putting up the slogans merely to ingratiate himself. He stops voting in elections he knows are a farce. He begins to say what he really thinks at political meetings, and he even finds the strength in himself to express solidarity with those whom his conscience commands him to support. In this revolt, the greengrocer steps outside of living within the lie. He rejects the ritual and breaks the rules of the game. He discovers once more his suppressed identity and dignity. He gives his freedom a concrete significance. His revolt is an attempt to live within the truth. And that is the power of rejecting the rituals of the Gadian robbers. We are told that these secret combinations, they had particular rituals. And in Eastern Europe, putting up these Workers of the World Unite signs and expressing your loyalty to the system was one of those rituals. But this is the weakness of the system. So then he explains what would happen to this greengrocer if he were to do that. He's going to lose his job, his pay is going to be reduced, his hopes for a holiday will go away, his kids won't be able to go to school, and everyone is going to persecute this greengrocer for the same reason that they put up signs in their store. And so he continues, he says, thus the power structure, through the agency of those who carry out the sanctions, those anonymous components of the system, will spew the greengrocer from its mouth. The system, though its alienating presence in people, will punish him for his rebellion. It must do so because of the logic of its automatism and self-defense dictated. The greengrocer has not committed a simple individual offense, isolated in its own uniqueness, but something incomparably more serious. By breaking the rules of the game, he has disrupted the game as such. He has exposed it as a mere game. He has shattered the world of appearances, the fundamental pillar of the system. He has upset the power structure by tearing apart what holds it together. He has demonstrated that living a lie is living a lie. He has broken through the exalted facade of the system and exposed the real base foundations of power. He has said that the emperor is naked. And because the emperor is in fact naked, something extremely dangerous has happened. By his action, the greengrocer has addressed the world. He has enabled everyone to peer behind the curtain. He has shown everyone that it is possible to live within the truth. Living within the lie can constitute the system only if it is universal. The principle must embrace and permeate everything. There are no terms whatsoever on which it can coexist with living within the truth, and therefore everyone who steps out of line denies it in principle and therefore in its entirety. This is understandable. As long as appearance is not confronted with reality, it does not seem to be appearance. As long as living a lie is not confronted with living the truth, the perspective needed to expose its mendacity is lacking. As soon as the alternative appears, however, it threatens the very existence of appearance and living a lie in terms of what they are, both their essence and their all-inclusiveness. And at the same time, it is utterly unimportant how large a space this alternative occupies. Its power does not consist in its physical attributes, but in the light it casts on those pillars of the system and on its unstable foundations. After all, the greengrocer was a threat to the system not because of any physical or actual power he had, but because his action went beyond itself, because it illuminated its surroundings, and of course, because of the incalculable consequences of that illumination in the post-totalitarian system. Therefore, living within the truth has more than a mere existential dimension, returning humanity to its inherent nature, or a noetic dimension, revealing reality as it is, or a moral dimension, setting an example for others. It also has an unambiguous political dimension. If the main pillar of the system is living a lie, then it is not surprising that the fundamental threat to it is living the truth. This is why it must be suppressed more severely than anything else. In the post-totalitarian system, truth in the widest sense of the word has a very special import, one unknown in other contexts. In this system, truth plays a far greater, and above all a far different role as a factor of power, or as an outright political force. How does the power of truth operate? How does truth as a factor of power work? How can its power as a power be realized? And that's the end of chapter 9, or section 9. And so that is very powerful. This is a manual on how to destroy Gadian robbers through truth. And it doesn't take anything big. It doesn't take any sort of strong-arm force. It literally requires a candle, a spark of light, a spark of truth. It requires a boy going into a grove and asking a question, and the curtains of reality can be peeled back. The tapestry, the wallpaper can be peeled from reality. That is our mission. If we are to defeat evil and be like Captain Moroni and have the very gates of hell shut, this is the way that we must live. Darkness cannot coexist with the light. We know that truth, we know that first-hand accounts of the past are extremely powerful. You know, people's conversion stories are very powerful. So, for example, another very interesting story is this lady named Freda Utley, who was a friend of that famous math guy, Bertrand Russell. And she was a young English girl who got seduced by this communist propaganda in the early 1900s. And she actually ended up marrying a Russian and moving to the Soviet Union. And she wrote a book called Lost Illusion about how the scales fell from her eyes and her experiences in Russia, and how she came to realize that it was all a farce. And things continued to get worse and worse. You know, she had it better than most. as an educated foreigner who was married to a higher ranking party member. Not super high, but a little bit higher than, a grunt. Eventually things get extremely bad. She's pregnant. Her husband gets disappeared, and she has to give birth to her son in a Soviet hospital, and she tells her story, and it is nightmarish. And this woman is just unbreakable. And she is absolutely distraught because her husband is missing. And the way it works under this horrible system is her husband is taken from her, and she is not informed that he was taken. She doesn't know what crime he committed. She doesn't know why. She doesn't know when. He's just gone. She doesn't know if he's guilty or not. She doesn't know if he's been sent to Siberia or executed or held prisoner. She doesn't know. And thus she is held hostage in Russia for a time out of fear of what will happen to her husband. And she laments the fact that the communist regime is more cruel than the Nazis, because she knows from her friends that when you are interred in a Nazi camp, you know why. That they inform you what crime you committed and where you are. You're allowed to send them letters. And if they get sick and die, you will be informed. And you're able to send them packages. And so there's a lot more transparency into that. And she is just absolutely distraught and longing. She's wishing. There's this part of the book where she wishes that her husband had been captured by Nazis instead of communists. It is a mind-breaking experience to read books like this. Or a book that I read in high school was Life and Death in Shanghai, which is a similar story of a capitalist woman. I think she worked for Shell Oil, and how her life was destroyed during the Cultural Revolution, and how her daughter was taken from her, and how she learned to live in that system. It's just crazy. And China was influenced by the same people. The same group of people went to China and started this movement that destroyed. There's a part of the book where the Red Guard comes to her home and smashes her historical collection of ancient teapots on the ground, destroying, Chinese culture in the same way that in Russia they were dynamiting cathedrals. And it is just this evil thing to destroy those teapots. And so, back to Frida Utley, the British girl, she eventually makes it out of Russia, and she writes her book, and for a long time she is afraid to publish it, because she still has in the back of her mind what will happen to her husband if she publishes it. But she eventually has to decide that she cannot live a lie, and she has to speak the truth, regardless of the consequences. And she never found out what happened to her husband, which I'm pretty sure he died in Siberia. She had to speak the truth. She had to step outside the lie. And this is what we must do as a church if we are to defeat the great and abominable counter-church that exists within every organization that seeks to do good. Oh, what are you saying? What are you saying? Are you saying we need to turn the church into a political platform? No. It's not my personal political platform. That's not what I'm saying. Our political platform is establishing God's kingdom on this green earth so that it doesn't become a green hell. That is our political platform. And we're not going to call it something stupid like Deseret nationalism. We're not going to call it that, because that, while inflammatory and eye-catching, is easy to dismiss. It's all about marketing. It needs to be something powerful, something untouchable, at least by the leaders of the church. We can't have the leaders of the church disavowing us because they are on our side. And so we need to name it in such a way, we need to mark ourselves in such a way that people know whose side we are on. In the same way that the Amlicites marked themselves apart from the Nephites, we need to make sure that we do not do that. So it should be called something like the Joseph Smith movement, because you can't disavow Joseph Smith. You can't just say, oh, they're crazy. So it will be called the Joseph Smith movement. And we need an elite group of people to strengthen their brethren. And we have to look good. We have to wear white shirts, not be weird. We can't mark ourselves apart in any way. We can't be carrying special symbols or having special hand signs. or putting all of our names on a list so that the feds can put us all in jail. Not that we would do anything like that. We're not going to commit any crimes, obviously, but you get what I'm saying. We need to be normal, run-of-the-mill members. You know, we can't be kooky. We can't be seeking the second comforter and telling people that we went to Temple Square at midnight in the summer and had a conversation with an angel or something. We can't. I mean, if that happens for real and you shake his hand and it's like real, then maybe. But be careful, okay? We cannot look kooky. There's all this business about speaking in tongues, and if you've seen what that looks like in a Protestant church, it looks like a devil is inside them. And Joseph Smith warned against seeking the gift of tongues because it is frequently a gift that is abused by devils to deceive you. So we need to be extremely careful. But what can we actually do? There's a lot that we can actually do. In software, you never know how a user is going to use a feature. It's almost impossible to know. They will outsmart you. And the best example I can think of this is there's a very funny story about how on Reddit, bullying people is against the rules. And if you send mean messages, you can get banned from a subreddit. That's how it works. But they figured out a way how to send messages that cannot be banned. And the way that you do it, you create a new user, and then in the username slot, instead of picking a username, you type your mean message, right? And then you subscribe to a user. And they get a notification, a message that says, mean message has subscribed to you. And because they've never posted on a subreddit, they're a lurker, they've never posted on a subreddit, they cannot be banned. Because that's not how it works. You can't ban someone who's never done anything. And so they were able to just absolutely flood people's notifications with these mean messages that got around the guardrails of the system. And so every system can be exploited. And the system of the church is currently being exploited by our enemies. And no one is doing anything about it. You know, in speedrunning, if you've ever watched any of these speedrunning videos, they're pretty entertaining, but they always say, oh, no one's going to beat that time. Someone always does, because they always find another exploit. You know, some of these 3D games, there's almost infinite combinations of inputs, and over time, by using some very complicated computer science knowledge and even building scripts to test things, speedrunners have reverse engineered ways to rewrite the code of the game with the controller, and they've turned Super Mario into Flappy Bird. I mean, in like Ocarina of Time, the famous 64 game, they are able to reprogram the boots, and so their value hexadecimal 16. So they're called F boots because, 16. And the F boots don't have gravity, and so this allows them to change a lot of the rules of the game. And so every system can be exploited. The church system, we've seen it be exploited by people. And it's been exploited by our enemies. They want to use our churches. They want to use the Deseret News. They want to use speeches at BYU that people are going to talk about to access our megaphone to the people, which is millions of people. And so we can workshop the exact strategy, the exact message. It needs to be perfect. And it needs to be inspired of God. And it needs to be a unifying message. And I have some ideas. For one, we can communicate telepathically with Joseph Smith. And I'm not talking about visions. I'm talking about the historical record. We can become experts on Joseph Smith and who he was. And we can then relay that telepathic communication to everyone around us. And talking about Joseph Smith has great power because it will reframe the way you think about the gospel, the way you think about what Zion means. That it's not just a metaphor, it's not just symbolic. That's not how Joseph Smith liked to talk. He liked to talk about actual physical things you can do. This is why they're building Nauvoo, they're building Kirtland, they're going to the Rocky Mountains to establish Zion. And so we can force everyone to talk about Joseph Smith. So how many stakes are in Utah? Not that many, a few hundred. How many wards are in Utah? I looked it up, it's like maybe 5,000. Most of these places meet in the same building. And we wouldn't need to visit all of them. some of the more rural ones. But you just hit the main cities, there's this open mics every month. And with a coordinated, almost like a DDoS attack, a coordinated testimony, like they do those raids on Twitter. You could almost do like a raid on different wards on the open mic, on testimony meeting. And that sounds inappropriate, but if we are talking about Joseph Smith and bearing our testimony of Joseph Smith and talking about real historical records of Joseph Smith, it's going to be very hard to tell us to stop. And the culture generally discouraged from filming or recording at fast and testimony meetings, which is good. This works in our favor because the church wants to protect itself from scandal, but it can also protect us. Now, if we did this a lot, eventually someone would get recorded and there probably would be consequences. If we had the message exactly right, it would be very hard to disprove or to dismiss. And this is what I'm talking about, activating the culture. Like, how do we hack the culture of Utah? Because it's so easy. The people are chomping at the bit for this. They want the excitement. And I told the story about how, like, a Sunday school lesson can go from, like, the worst Sunday school lesson to the best Sunday school lesson, all because someone is willing to, like the greengrocer, just ignore the ritual of what we're doing, where we share our thoughts, and start to actually say what you think. That's what the greengrocer does. He starts to actually say what he thinks at the political meetings that he is required to go to. And when we start to actually speak, people might start to actually listen. It wouldn't take that many people to hit enough wards with the same message that people talk about it on Twitter and on social media. And here's another thing. We don't have lessons in church in second hour. We have discussions. You can raise your hand and literally say whatever you want. And you know what the lesson is going to be in advance because it's come follow me. And so we could have a prepared message. And if we hit enough wards, if we have enough people going to enough wards saying the right things about Joseph Smith for every lesson, then we control everything. We would control everything. We'd have more power than CES, the guys writing the manuals. The guys writing the manuals can do whatever they want. But if we have sleeper agents in every single class where the manuals are being discussed, there is nothing that they can do. And this is what I'm talking about with almost a secret society of people who are going to push the narrative back to Joseph Smith and his message, because frankly, anything that is pre-enlightenment is extremely difficult for the modern brain to understand. And this is why Joseph Smith is a perfect conduit for us in the modern world to comprehend the mysteries of godliness, to get ourselves closer to Christ, to understand the Book of Mormon, to understand the D&C, and therefore, the Bible and the entire history of creation. It is Joseph Smith, and I'm not talking about worshiping him, but he is the prophet of our dispensation. He is the prime mover prophet. He's the guy who started it all. If we had a network like this, this is mostly fantasy and will probably never happen, but if we had a network like this, we have the ears of the young men who will serve missions, and the missionaries from Utah go throughout the entire world. And so if we have them on our side, we control the entire future of the entire church. Utah truly is the central hub of everything. And I'm sick of these multi-level marketing people being able to hijack our culture and abuse it so that they can become millionaires and go live their life and leave the rest of us like a bunch of chumps with our money, our pockets a little lighter. I'm sick of it. And so I want to hack the culture for good. And by accessing all the wards in Utah, we could, like I said, we have the ear of the youth, which are the future missionaries. They're the future bishops, future stake presidents, future general authorities. We also have the ear of the bishop, or the high priest council, who may be stake presidents and authorities even sooner. We would really control everything. And it would be extremely hard to stop us because what are they going to say? You're not allowed to quote Joseph Smith in testimony meeting? You're not allowed to bear your testimony of things Joseph Smith said? You're not allowed to raise your hand and come follow me and talk about things Joseph Smith said? There's a lot of things that Joseph Smith said that are very shocking, that are very polarizing, that will bring the wheat to our side, and hopefully will scare some of these tares out of the church, because I would love that everyone could get behind us. And I think Joseph Smith is truly the most unifying topic that we could choose, because you can go to one of these break-off groups, and as long as you're a turbo fan of Joseph Smith, you're pretty much welcome there. And that's something that unites us, even across a boundary of faith. We can disagree if Russell M. Nelson has the keys or all the keys, or if the church has fallen or not, but as long as we're super fans of Joseph Smith, we're friends. And so it is probably our best bet. At least that's my thought. And if we were able to get momentum behind something like this, Utah could become a literal hellscape for everyone who isn't 100% on board with Joseph Smith. You know, the Post Malones of the world will no longer be saying that Utah is a good place to live. They will say, get out. They're crazy. They're crazy. We need to get out of here. Those house prices might start to get a little bit more affordable, you know. Not everyone wants to live here because it's full of zealots who are 100% committed to light and truth. You know, the city councils could start getting flooded with petitions with thousands of signatures telling the city council that we, the people of the city, of the municipality, we request that all liquor licenses for all businesses that are within 6 million miles of any public school will not be renewed. The sex shop on Main Street, the city council just decided that their billboard is offensive to the youth and it must be changed or taken down. The flower beds in front of the cannabis medical marijuana store are not to code. The city council is going to hassle them and make them flip it back and forth. Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap. There's a lot of things that we can do legally. As members of the church, we are the dominant power in Utah. We're not the dominant power in America, but we are the dominant power in Utah. And we can dominate here. It could be awesome. I was on Twitter, and this rabbi who lives in Utah, I think he lives in Provo or Salt Lake, and he was able to get a bar shut down after October 7th for saying Free Palestine or having a sign or something about Free Palestine. He was able to get them shut down. And you know, that gave me an idea. It's like, if that guy can do it legally, we should be able to get all the bars shut down. Any bar that is serving anything stronger than a mild barley drink, they can be shut down. And you know, most modern beers are quite strong, so it's just gonna have to be all of them. Sorry, I don't make the rules. This is Joseph Smith's teachings. And you know, but Joseph Smith, he drank. Yeah, but if Joseph Smith was alive today, he wouldn't drink, okay? He wouldn't drink if he was alive today, because drinking is low class and low IQ and all these things. It's just bad, okay? And in the 1800s, it was different. And I don't want to live in the 1800s. We need Mormon futurism. You know, every lesson is going to be about Joseph Smith. It's not just going to be the lesson, it's going to be our lesson. And all the lawyers who are employed at CES, they're going to be losing their minds about what to do. How do we stop them? They won't stop quoting Joseph Smith and the early apostles. They won't stop doing it. What do we do? What do we do? Do we get rid of testimony meeting? This is unstoppable. We have to be very careful, but we can do it. You know, the Who Killed Joseph Smith guy, he's able to get a page. He's able to get a church essay on the church website. Ordain women. By getting people to wear purple pants to church, she was able to get an age change for sister missionaries. And we don't even have a priesthood session anymore for general conference. So, changes can be made. Changes for the good. And you're just going to have to deal with it. Sorry, honey. So anyway, I don't know the exact specifics of what we would do. We would need to workshop, and we need loyal soldiers in the Nauvoo Legion. We need the modern day Joseph's boys for the Joseph Smith movement, where all will recognize Joseph Smith as the prophet of the Restoration, a true leader, the greatest man who has ever lived. The only person greater would be Jesus Christ, who is not a man, but God. And so, this is the way we prepare the way of the Lord. For I have seen it in vision. Nah, I'm just kidding. But it's an idea, and I think it could get people really excited. And everything about the church could be used. Ministering just got that much more exciting. Hey, do you want to go hit up a whole bunch of testimony meetings with me? Here's your notes. There's 4 meetings in that building, all back to back. I don't know. It's just a thought. We need to dream big. And if we could radically change the culture of the church is a giant, very powerful institution, and it could have sway on America and future of the entire world. And I believe that it will, but it really depends on you, and it depends on me, and it depends on all those who are descended from Ephraim, who have this calling. And so, what can we do? Think about it. Think of some ideas. I don't want to be guilty of engagement farming. But if you have good ideas, feel free to email me, or, I guess you could comment them below. But I don't know if we want these videos to get too much attention. We only want loyal people watching these. We don't want crazy people watching these, people who are going to sabotage us. So, but those are some thoughts, and think about it. The power of the powerless. Light the candle of truth. Shed light on the foundations, the pillars of power. And there is unlimited power in that. There is untapped potential in living the truth. And we have the highest truth, and that is the truth of the restoration. And inasmuch as we live it, we will be a light to the world.